Hello, everybody. Sorry for the delay. I had a computer problem, but we have a computer expert here with us, and she goes by Mo, her full name, so you know how to read it because I shared it with you earlier, A Mo. And she's the CEO of Boomerang, a tool that I've been using for, I would say, years. And Mo, I have a question for you. Do you ever
Mhm.
get ghosted when you write emails yourself?
Oh yeah, all the time. I think that's just, part of life.
So that's so funny. As fundraisers, that happens to us a whole lot. And if you're in the chat right now, please do tell us a story or let us know maybe out of the 10, 10 emails, how many do you expect a reply from? And if you say 9 or 10, I don't know if we're going to believe you. So we'll put your answer on the screen if you care to do that. So we're here to spend some time with you. Mo is going to be sharing a lot of research. They've taken something that's pretty sounds simple, right? Like scheduling a meeting. But so we're just going to be sharing some slides. If we go, if we have questions, Mo, I'm going to shut up. Please feel to introduce yourself and let us know what we're going to talk about.
Hi everybody. Thanks for having me, and thanks Louise for inviting me to join your community. I am Amo. We been working on email for almost over a decade now, and especially email productivity in particular. And we have basically tried to build the everyday productivity tools for everybody, right? So we have had the opportunity to kind of specialize our company in different directions, like build a sales tool or build an HR tool, but we continue to stay horizontal and make sure that we are serving problems that people are having with email, meeting scheduling, personal productivity in different directions throughout the time that company's been around. So, and we
That's
actually have a lot of nonprofits in our customer base, and nonprofit admins are one of the major segment for our people.
That's amazing. And this is an example. Us in the nonprofit sector, Mo, have usually have trouble getting attention of like the big SaaS player, productivity tool players. We have very kind of specific needs, but we're also like a
Mhm.
third of the workforce. So
Yeah.
it's so wonderful that you made the time to actually join us and to share a little bit. I think the use case for your tool is spot on for what we're doing. Um,
And the
so
other
if you're
part is I want to add a little bit more about our company. We have been donating to education in Burma, where I'm originally from. So when we started the company, we put it in our company charter that we will donate a portion of our profits back to father support education in Burma. So we've been building schools in Burma with a
Wow.
nonprofit called Build a School in Burma for the last 6 or 7 years, and then recently we have to stop because of the political situation in Burma. So we haven't been able to do that. So then we have spread out to help education in the sectors here where they are working on climate change. So we've been donating to academic labs to support climate change. So I'm actually on the board of Build a School in Burma and been part of the journey why we get our 501(c)(3) status and all that fun stuff.
Wow. So do you use your own tool in your day-to-day life? Tell us,
Of course,
including your nonprofit service?
including our nonprofit, including kind of our board communication, development with potential donors. The board likes to pull me out sometimes, especially when they are trying to reach across generations. I'm the youngest board member, so
Interesting.
and yeah, and when they need to get a connection with a Burmese American, so that kind of stuff. So I'm usually the the little token next generation member for the board.
Awesome. Well, I know. I've been in that role too. Mo, maybe we ask, before going into the slides, we ask people that are here on a 1 to 10 scale, how painful it is to schedule meetings. Like, I'd love to hear this from folks. And do you do them yourself? Do you have an assistant? Do you use a tool? I think that would be
Mhm.
really interesting
Yep.
to hear from folks. So without further ado, let me figure out the sharing of
Mhm.
your wonderful presentation and we can get started. Does that sound like a plan?
Sounds good.
Okay. So let me know. Is this a good, is this your, can you see it?
Yep.
Awesome. So I'll
Can
just go
people
through it.
see it? I have a parallel deck here, so I'm okay. You can. Do you want to make it bigger, or this is good? Maybe make it.
Mm, Let me see.
Can you hide the left side? Maybe.
Uh,
Maybe not.
well, I'm sure there's a way we can fit the page with it. No.
No, it's okay.
Mm.
We can go with this.
Okay, thank
Um,
you.
so we already introduced uh, my company and what we do. So I just want to go a little bit more into where our data is coming from. So let's go to the next slide.
Got it.
So in our decades in email productivity, we have handled more than 280 million emails. So these are individual emails. These are not bulk emails. The individual email that people are either scheduling, sending it back to themselves as a boomerang, or asking us to track for a response, or they are tracking whether people have read the email. So all kinds of different activities that people are doing, and these are individual emails that people have personally handled within the Boomerang system. We have also scheduled over 500,000, 500,000 meetings so far. Um,
Well,
that's a lot of meetings and a lot of time that you can just imagine if it takes about 10 to 15 minutes to kind of go back and forth, giving people time, trying to find what time they are available, just to find out that the time that you gave is no longer available. That back and forth, what we know from research is that it takes about 8 emails to get a meeting scheduled,
mhm.
back and forth. So if you take 500,000 meetings times 8, that's 4 million emails that we have cut out to get a time on the
So
calendar.
Mo, have you calculated this in like human lifespans? Because oh my
we
goodness.
we haven't gotten that far yet. We thought about it. We're like, how do we define all these times? And we could definitely calculate with like how much of your work life or work years it takes to get through this, right?
Oh my
And
goodness. Because can I give you some color, Mo, on
uh-huh,
like the life of a fundraiser doing this? Okay, so you
okay.
have one-on-one meetings, you have
Hmm.
volunteer group meetings, like that board you
Uh-huh.
mentioned, or other outreach, and you're trying to get them. I'm jumping on a meeting today after our call that we've been trying
Mhm.
to schedule for a month and a half. It's
Right.
involved doodle polls and emails and an assistant and other assistants. It's been,
Yeah.
horrible.
Yeah, we're hoping to change that for everybody. Because we did the email management, inbox management for the last decade. So the meeting scheduling is going to be our next decade. We have about 4 major products, one in Outlook, one in Gmail, and we have an Android client and an iOS email client, full feature client. So across those 4 products, we have about 5 million users using it in various ways. So I can move forward to the next part. And these are a few different features in the Boomerang product, though. So it's almost become a product suite. And the
Mhm.
few things that I wanted to talk about today, what makes an email respondable, we use the data from the third bullet, remind me if no reply. So that feature is if you write an email, of course, as Louise is saying, right? You send an email, 9 out of 10 times you don't get a response. You want to be reminded after a certain time that, hey, I sent an email to Jonathan. He didn't send me a response back, and it's been 2 weeks. I should follow up. So we have about 40 million individual emails that people were trying to track if they get a response or not, and then be reminded if they didn't get a response. So we use those 40 million email to train our data set to find out for an individual email that you are writing, what makes it easier to respond, what makes it more likely to get a response. From those 40 million emails and the data training, we were able to build this product called Respondable. And that's kind of a real-time AI assistant. When you're writing an email, we will actually analyze the body of the email, subject of the email, and figure out what can be improved in that email to get a response. So I'm just going to dive right into the individual data there.
Awesome.
So
So
anatomy
then,
of a, yes, that's perfect.
yep.
Anatomy of a respondable email. So we wanted to talk about what pieces of an email that are relevant. So when we train the data, we were looking at every single possible thing that could impact the respondability of an email. And these are the major factors that influence the probability, or, the chance that you get a response. So the first one is very, very intuitive. So I order these into the kind of a intuitive to non-intuitive order, so that at the very end, you'll get a little bit more insightful data. So if you're thinking, well, I knew that, don't give a hope for my presentation yet. It will come. Keep it brief, but not too brief. So shorter emails usually get a better response. I'll get into the individual data later. Trim your subject line, which is kind of a thing, in other medium, the subject line doesn't have as big of importance, but in email it does. Include questions, again, is pretty intuitive. If you're asking a questions, human nature, people like to answer you. Be less objective. That's a little bit something that I have to train myself on, and I'll get more into that. Show some emotion, again, ability to kind of show your personality and individually into the email. And then the last one is write simply. That's the most surprising insight that we found when we did the data ourselves. Let's move on to the email length. This is basically from our training data, that how many emails get the response depending on the length of the email. And the sweet spot right here is between 50 to 125 words. Around there, your probability is definitely higher, and doesn't really, it drop off. So it's not like if you write more than 125 words and it becomes 126 words, you don't get a response. The drop off is kind of gradual until about when you get to in the 2,000 words. So I would say the optimal word is around 125 words. If you think about it in practical terms, it's about 2 paragraphs and maybe an intro sentence. That's like the perfect sweet spot for general business email. But if you really need to add a little bit more color and clarity, it's okay to go, as long as you are not writing war and peace in your email. Moving on to subject line length. This is, again, is super interesting. The ideal was actually around 3 or 4 words, which kind of hard for me. Sometimes, you want to kind of like make sure they know exactly what the email is about. But what we learned is, in the day of mobile email clients, these 3 or 4 words are the only things people can see. So by training yourself to put the punchiest, most important part of your subject line fit into the 3 or 4 words, that means people who are opening on mobile knows what you're talking about without having to really, like, or they might see the first few words and they're like, I don't know if it's relevant. If you stuff the first 3 or 4 words with kind of generic words, and then they might not open the email, and then you might not get a response because of that. But the main part here is, if you don't include a subject line at all, the response rate is the lowest. So if you have 0 words on the subject line, that's 14% compared to 4 or 5 words, or 3, 4, 5 words, that's over 48 to 50. So that's the main thing, is try to include a subject line, and then try to put the most important keywords, the critical parts, at the very beginning of the subject line, so that they can see on mobile. Again, we were talking about this, right? Next part is including questions. So Luis, can we get to the next slide?
There we go.
It's not loading, huh? There we go. So again, the number of question has a sweet spot, just like the length of email. If you are counting the number of questions, the ideal is between 1 to 3, which makes sense. If you have some questions, they may answer it. And then if you have a lot of questions, like 8 or more, then people kind of give up and get overwhelmed and just, give their hands up and like, okay, I'm not, they have too many questions, I can help them. And if you have no questions, it's about 40%. So what we learn from our research is it's always nice to include some sort of substantial questions, not like how are you doing, but like a substantial, like, hey, have you thought about, you can include an industry new, or you can include a thing, something that might be happening with either your school or your organization, and like, hey, have you seen this news? And they may be like, no, I haven't, but that's still a questions for them to kind of engage and respond.
Can I,
Again, yeah.
Mo, can I interrupt you
Mhm.
for a moment?
Right.
How do you define the question? Is it, because I play a lot with your tool? So
Yeah.
it's something that has a question mark. Is that like the definition?
We're using so we are only trained in English. So if you're in a different language, I apologize, but we are just using the question words. So how, why, what, when, and a question mark, a combination of those two. Yes.
Okay. Well, I mean, this is critical because so many times we write people and it's like we're just telling them things. And, our goal
Yeah.
as fundraisers is to start conversation. So,
Yeah.
I say that's almost the most important metric, even more than open rates or click-through rates, right? Is how many
Mhm.
conversations start. And
Yeah.
this one
And
here kind of shows the power of that.
yeah, it's like just some sort of engagement for them to be father the correspondence, right? Then you can come back with something else is definitely a very critical part of it. And the next one is be less objective, which is a little bit hard for me because I'm like a trained engineer, and I will try to, like, as you're trained as an engineer, you always say, okay, don't put like what's your opinion, like, when you're presenting something, when you're, try to persuade something, we are mostly told to be objective and like don't put your personal, I think, I feel, that kind of words out of the conversation. And what we're actually seeing is that the more opinionated you sound, the higher the response rate. The only thing is we don't actually know if the response are positive or negative in terms of like, hey, hey,
Stop
like,
fighting.
so it depends on the context. That's why, we build a AI assistant to help you write better. We didn't write it for you because we know that the person who is writing, the human, know best the recipient and what they would be responsive to. But in general, injecting your personal opinion and getting less like, here is a fact,
No.
like it is raining versus, oh, isn't it great it's raining, right? So that's the subjective and objective part. And the other part, so let's go to the next one. That's a little bit interesting in the sense that it is intuitive in a way that we would humans understand. Like if you show emotion, if you're in a speech, if you're in a class, if you're presenting,
Mhm.
people love emotion. But what we found is a bimodal part. So if you show too much emotion, it's not that good. If you show
Mhm.
no emotion, it's not good. If you show too positive, super hyper, Pollyanna, it's not great either. So you want it to be, there's just like a weird middle, bimodal in the middle where you are slightly negative or slightly positive, where it has a sweet spot. So I'll show you a live of our Respondable 2, and we can kind of see a different, like what I mean by too negative versus just negative enough. And then, sometimes we have to convey not exactly happy news, and you can
Mhm.
show some emotion to say how disappointed or what's going on with the situation.
But don't overdo it.
But don't overdo it. So if you get super, super negative, then people kind of probably, it's like, oh, it's a downer. I don't want to respond to this.
Well, this is
Right?
dangerous.
Yeah.
And
And then the hyper positive thing is also like it feels unnatural in human communication. If you get
Mhm.
super like syrupy sweet, then they kind of pull back too. So
Sounds like some of our emails. And Mo, this aligns so much with kind of what we think about, writing and
Mhm.
fundraising.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting to see the nuances that you discovered. So yes, try to be human, but don't turn it into a joke, essentially, or
Yeah.
your hate mail.
Yes, exactly. Next one is the most surprising insight, at least to me and my team when we did the data crunching. That is that you want to write more simply than you're used to, because we are, when we go into workforce, or like when you got to college, right? You're like, write, complex sentences. You want to appear professional. You want to appear sophisticated, and you want to look smart, right? That's usually how we've been kind of like told how business writing should be. And
Mhm.
what we found actually was that the simpler the sentence structure and the simpler the word, so equivalent to a third grade reading level. So this is from the Flash Kincaid reading level calculator, right? We use the same stuff. Is if you're writing at a third grade level, it's about 36% lift over if you're writing at the college level. And which is like, a lot of us in, like, especially if you're working in higher education and stuff, you just
Mhm.
are so used to writing more sophisticated language. And the one thing to remember is the harder it is to read, the harder it is for them to comprehend and write it back to you and process it. So we are it may not come natural to you, and of course, you don't want to make it sound like you're writing like a kindergartner. But
Mhm.
if you can simplify the number of syllables, so if you can use a simpler word, if you can use a simpler sentence structure, break up your sentences and make it clear, that will usually help with your communication in general, and then getting a response especially.
Awesome. I mean, this to me as a direct, as a fundraising writer is not a
Yeah.
surprise. So it is kind
Okay.
of part of the what we know in the field, but it's still very hard, especially if you get like a professor to write, when
Yeah.
you start working with people,
Hmm.
you have to tell them, well, the goal is to get answers, not just to kind of, show how smart we are.
Yes. Yeah. And like, you like to sound like serious and have gravitas, you kind of want to write a little bit
Hmm.
more, and you try to pull it back to like, what would an everyday person, normal person with, not 17, 18 years of college graduation will
Exactly.
talk and write. Yeah. So those are the emails that you write. And then I wanted to talk a little bit more about what would, how do you close your email? So again, we crunch a lot of data on the what email closing people use, and there's a lot of debate on what's the correct way to do it. But overall, what we found is expressing some sort of gratitude in the email.
Hmm.
So saying thank you, thanks in advance, thanks, any form of, thankfully, any of those will increase your response rate compared to something classic like best or regards. This is across, so the increase is, compared to an average email without an email closing. So
Okay. Mo, can you explain a little bit more of the data set that you use to, I can see that you used to generate this. I can see some people thinking, well, I don't know, I do this and my emails get answered.
right.
Um,
Yeah, so this
what,
is generalized, right? Our Boomerang user base is, as I mentioned, we didn't specialize into any sector. So it's across white collar professionals, across different industry. Everything is in English, so we didn't
Mhm.
count so we have international users, but we were using only English, and we were using general business email. So if we weren't specializing for fundraising versus, sales email versus HR email or something like that.
This is great stuff. And it kind of, a response is a gift and you want to thank it. So it does make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I'm
So
using.
when we have this, we kind of like, we're like, this is kind of interesting. Like, and there were a little
Mhm.
bit pushback on people like, thanks in advance is a little bit presumptuous. Like you're assuming that they will do the request that
Yeah.
you're asking. So we actually look into some of the academic research, and Professor Adam Grant from Pennsylvania did the same thing, and he
Huh.
found that thankful closings are also like, so they were doing with like, college student classic experiment style, and they found that
Yeah.
people who are asking for help and then end the email with some sort of expressing gratitude get a better help from other people when they're asking for it. So it's
And
not.
Professor Grant did research with student callers. That's exactly what student fundraising
Mhm.
callers.
Yeah.
So it's so cool that our worlds are colliding here.
Yeah, it means that, it's not like exactly like, hey, replicable
Mhm.
research or experiment, but we kind of see similar conclusion from different directions, and that's kind of neat,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
So at the very end, let me go to the next part. So we talk about how to write the better email, how to close the email, and then we should remember to send at better time. So I don't know if we have a lot of, do we have like international audience here? If you're working across time zone, or people who are in development working with international donors and
Mhm.
international counterpart, please consider their time zone, because we may be writing the email at our office time, but that might be 2 a.m. in their time, and that's usually what happens is, emails arrive overnight and then it piles up, and then when they come to the office, most email inboxes are sorted last to like least recent to older. So then
Okay.
if you're sending it like, their 2 a.m., your email is buried, and then they get so busy that they might not get to the bottom and then miss your
Mhm.
email. Um,
Huh.
and we also found the data, the email sent between 6 and 7 a.m. has a 40% better response rate than email sent between 4 to 5 p.m. local time. And this is not, we're not talking about like the MailChimp type of data. This is individual one-on-one correspondence and people
Beautiful.
where we are tracking. So it should be pretty relevant. Of course, the person individually. They might be like, I don't check email in the morning, or I don't check email afternoon, depending on if you're working with, teachers, or like depending on the situation, you can optimize. But overall, if you are sending a new email to a new person, try to aim for the email to arrive in their inbox between 6 to 7 a.m. their time.
This is so great. And even when we're working East Coast, West Coast, right? This is something to
Right.
consider.
Yeah, just 3 hour difference. And you maybe like, I think East Coast people have it a little bit easier, because you guys wake up and
We're
send
gonna
it
get
more.
you. We're gonna get you early, no matter what, right?
Yeah, exactly. The other way is a little bit harder, and that's why we have to schedule our emails and make sure it arrives to the right time.
Very smart, sneaky. I like it. We have a good comment from
Yeah.
Monica in the chat. She's asking, or she's, reflecting on,
Oh,
that those higher up in the chain tend to use thanks in advance. So there might be like a power signaling thing
power
going on.
dynamic, definitely. Yeah, I could see that happening, and there is a little bit of presumption, like the things in advances, and like I would expect, my expectation is you will do what I am asking in this email a little bit. So maybe that's
Hmm.
why. But
It's a little
we,
bit pushy.
yeah, a little
Well,
bit
we
pushy,
also
definitely.
and Mo, we also have like a saying in fundraising, and not everybody agrees with it, but kind of that you have to like presume the gift. So talk as if it's a done deal, that and you're thanking
Yeah,
them for the
yeah.
gift that they haven't technically made yet, but you're
Yeah,
you're
so
thanking
just
them as if.
I guess we can frame it as like being a little bit optimistic.
Exactly.
Optimistic for the best outcome.
That's a great way to put it. Thank you.
Yeah. And then the next one is so now that we already sent an email, we want to kind of, the second part is the follow-up game, right? So you need to keep better track of the email that you sent. You can do it with something like a read receipt. So there are, I think, Outlook and stuff, might have it in their features, and then we have it in Boomerang. And then that kind of tell you, did they read the email? Did they click the email? Um, did they click the links in the email? And you have a little bit more understanding, or like, and sometimes you'll see like they didn't respond, but they read the email like 25 times, which means it's on their top of mind, and they're just like, you're just making it, something must be difficult for them to respond in the email, and you can probably like follow up with a little bit less intense email, or sometimes I find like I ask something and then I know they open the email for 20, 30 times and they haven't responded to me. So I know that like they care about this. Otherwise, why do they keep opening, right? And then I will send a follow up with a little bit like easier ask, and then they will respond to the easier ask. So maybe that's something that we can think about. And then response tracking is mainly like for some things that I just don't want to keep track of in my mind, I would just send it and then say, remind me if, Luis didn't respond to me in three days, 7 days, whatever your time frame is. And then in Boomerang is a little bit of advanced usage, and it may be a little bit pushy, but we have a send later if no reply feature. So I write an email and then I say, if I don't get a response from Luis in 7 days, send this reminder. Hey, did you forget about this? And just please schedule it and let it go. So that's the part about, we can write the best email that we want. We can, right? Optimize the subject, body, everything. We have a really good email closing, everything is on point, but they may still not respond. So after that, what do you do? So the follow-up game is also as important as the first email that you send.
Boy, it sounds like you're a fundraiser. Oh.
Well, I'm a CEO, so I'm always, the last part is, this is a GIF. I don't know if you can run it. Maybe not, huh? It's okay. Well, you can describe it because you've been using it, right?
Oh my goodness. Yes. So I pulled, you invited me to pull a live email that that was using this. And let's try to see a share.
Okay.
Of this for a moment, and maybe you can like explain what it is that's happening. So I'm going to pull up an email from a gentleman called Mark Phillips, who has a fundraising consultancy in the UK.
Oh.
And he has a podcast, and he was inviting me to it. And so what tends to happen, we're all very busy. And he said, do you have dates? And then I reply with some dates, and then those dates don't work. And then he says, well, let's go back to the drawing board. And then sometimes you kind of just give up.
Right. Yeah.
And that's kind of the enemy here. So I had pulled it up, but then let me see here. And he just presented at a conference we did last Friday. Whoever's on here, Donor Participation Project Conference, it is amazing. So I invite you to check it out. But I'm going to put we're going to walk you through this live scheduling sequence.
Feature. Yeah, that would be great.
Here you go. So I thanked him after he went to the conference. And you're actually in my live inbox. So please be forgiving if you see anything that shouldn't be there. But I was thanking him for attending the conference, and we started a conversation. And then he mentioned his podcast, and I said I'd love to tell people about the Donor Participation Project, and that's this email.
Right.
And I invited him back to do one of these, like we're doing today, Mo. And this part is actually generated by your add-on.
Right.
And so I ended writing here. And then this is it. So let's see. This is what people see. So you can actually just generate a live calendar. And please interrupt me if I say anything wrong, right? But a calendar, this magically updates according to your availability whenever they read it. And they just have to click on it and schedule the meeting with you. So I didn't even get a response from him. The next I heard from him was a calendar appointment. We have the podcast recording scheduled. It was beautiful.
Yeah. So the main point here is, so Luis has set up his schedule where he's available to meet with people, and it's an hour time slot, and he has it set up, and then he can just send it to anybody who he needs to meet with. And when they get the email, so Mark got this email. Maybe Luis sent it in, last month. You could have sent this in March, and then we open it now. The image slide to the right time automatically, and it pulls as Luis' calendar is getting booked. So you can see on April 27, there is no time because he has, I assume, some big meeting or all-day event that making any new meetings. So as you get time book up, these slots just magically go away and you never had the double book problem again. And then the other part that's beautiful is you can actually include their time zone as you send it. I don't know, Luis have seen it. I should do a
Oh,
demo for him.
oh my,
Go to Compose.
oh
I'll
my
show you how to
goodness.
do it.
Okay, let's get one started.
Yeah, so click on the meet button, right?
Oh my goodness, I'm getting a lesson from a tech company CEO here,
How to
right here,
use
live with me.
it. So if you click on bookable schedule, so you have your stuff for 60 meeting, click on personalize. Here you can actually, rename it specifically for Mark with a parenthesis for their podcast recording, and then you can also customize the what time frame. So some meetings we want to happen immediately, and then like must happen, right? Or sometimes we want to happen in like, I guess it's probably doesn't happen as much for you guys, but sometimes I have to like punt some vendors later. So okay, he's in London, so you can include London. And then
I see. Like if you want to meet with them, not this week, I can't handle it this week. Let's do next week.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Or like, hey, I'm super busy. Like we had a product launch, so everything, including this meeting to post launch, then you can basically say, hey, May 15 to May 27 or something like that. And then you can just, and then click insert. So these customization, you don't have to do it for every meeting, but if you want to go extra personalized, you can. So here,
Oh my goodness,
it shows 2 time zone right next to each other. For us, especially West Coast people with London, is a nightmare because we we just like can't find. I actually just got a meeting moved because the guy said, "Oh, it's actually midnight my time," and there's no way. You guys are a little bit easier. I think it's about 7 hours difference.
Well, and it depends on the time of the year, daylight
Yeah,
savings
that's
time.
true. So all these calculations we put in our head, we don't have to anymore. Just say, hey, you're in London, I'm here, done. And then they can see that what's your time and what's their time together, which makes it a lot more, considerate and respectful for both parties.
And that was a big part of what I, loved when I reached out to you, Mo, was that piece of the consideration, right?
Yeah.
You're writing a donor.
Yeah.
You don't want to say, hey, if you're interested in meeting with me, check out this link from this other calendaring service. Which, I've heard fundraisers like, it almost feels insulting. So this just feels convenient. I'm just giving you my calendar. Do what you want.
Yeah. And it's like, there's this, in the social construct, right? Like you see somebody and you walk by somebody, you run into somebody and you're like, hey, we should meet sometime. Like they don't mean it. Like we should meet sometime versus like, hey, Louise, are you free next Friday at 3, right? That's a specific time where your intent of making this meeting happen is a lot more. So that's why we put, the live image calendar is a game changer. We are starting to hear from people saying their meeting booking rates are up, their drop-off rates. You're one of those customers who are telling us that. So yeah, that's, and I think people talk about like, oh, there's no power dynamic or people are just being touchy. And I'm like, well, if I'm the one asking for the meeting, and if I'm the one who really want this meeting to happen, I should make your life as easy as possible for us to find a time.
Wonderful. So this has been absolutely wonderful. We're close to the end of the hour. For you, it's early in the morning. Again, the West Coast, East Coast thing. How should people connect with you if they want to learn more, or with Boomerang?
I am on Twitter at amo. You can find me, and then my name is super unique. So if you just find me on LinkedIn, is other amo on there. Yeah, meet with me on LinkedIn, on Twitter. That's where I spend most of my time. So, and our company Twitter handle is at Boomerang.
At Boomerang. Great. In the next few minutes, and maybe even after we go, this video will stay here. So if you have questions for Mo about Boomerang, about how to use it in your shop, about anything, please feel free to put them on here. And we're tremendously grateful. Thank you for joining the Donor Participation Project group.
Thank you for doing the
Mo.
important work. You guys are the heroes.
Well, the donor. Well, it gets complicated. If you say the donor's the hero, then I don't know, but somebody is the hero. But yeah, we're grateful. Emails are the hero, which is what we spend most of our day doing. So thank you for making that part of our lives a little bit easier. And for everybody else that's here, let me put up the conference link, which is still happening. We'll love to see you. And maybe next time we have somebody from the Boomerang team talk to us about this great research. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
And have a great day.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.